Hey everyone, this is Matt from MMOs.com, and I'm here today to tell you about the Steam controller, Valve's misguided attempt at mixing a mouse and a gamepad. Early impressions seemed to imply that the haptics were great and felt like actual buttons, and the touchpads were great and felt natural and accurate, and unfortunately I have to tell you the opposite. While it's not nearly as hard to use as I've been hearing since early adopters got them last month, I feel that in games where the Steam controller works well, you are getting a nearly parallel experience to the peripheral it's competing with rather than something better. There's a core problem with combining the precision of a mouse and the input mechanism that is your thumb rather than using a laser. Then there's the fact that the haptics provide a subpar experience that I can only compare to a more persistent version of what happens when you set your phone to vibrate every time you touch the screen. Unlike that, the haptics are localized, but you would never be able to tell. The intensity doesn't change based on the proximity to the button or the origin of the joystick. Not to mention that the haptics are louder than a Wii U's disk drive. But you're probably wondering how the Steam controller plays with various games, so let's get to that part. My first test game was Echo of Soul, a generic free-to-play MMORPG. As expected, I was unable to comfortably map the controls within the confines of the Steam controller's layout. I was able to use only 18 slots of a combined 36 by employing a method similar to that of Final Fantasy XIV on console. Using point-and-click movement or holding both mouse buttons to move provided extra space to use for more skill mapping, but this will not work for all MMOs and will certainly not be comfortable to use. Even if you were to find a way to comfortably map the amount of skill slots you want to use, inventory management is slow and painstaking, with no way to make it easier. The MMO genre at large seems to elude gamepads for now. I had heard that shooters perform poorly on the Steam controller, but Warframe's addition of native Steam controller support was too intriguing to pass up. I loaded up Digital Extreme's own configuration and set off to hunt some Vernier. The experience was not nearly as bad as I had expected it to be, and I found that I was consistently making headshots, but I also found that my aim was significantly slower than when using a mouse due to having to carefully and painstakingly roll my thumb as the reticle approached my target in order to maintain accuracy. It didn't help matters that the configuration had a high outer ring dead zone. Trove, with its melee classes and third-person shooter control scheme, was the perfect chance to see how the Steam controller would perform in a free aiming environment where precision didn't matter. Additionally, unlike Echo of Soul, its ability keys fit comfortably on the shoulder buttons, lending to increased usability. When playing as the Neon Ninja, my experience was marginally the same as that of playing with a mouse and keyboard, albeit with sloppier aim. When playing with the Shadow Hunter, however, I often found myself missing targets by a hair as they rushed me. I found playing Trove with a controller to be oddly fitting, but your experience will vary based on the class you play, with melee classes being much easier to play. As a racing game, the Crew presented a unique opportunity to test out the Steam controller's gyroscopic controls. I'd had a positive experience with Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed when using the touchpad, but its physics model was far less realistic. Unfortunately, my time with the Crew was largely punctuated by frustration. While I was using the configuration that claimed to have aggressive and precise gyroscopic steering, I found that it lacked the punch of steering with the joystick. I would often turn far less than I wanted to, and when tilted too far, turns would be lesser than they should have been. Using the touchpad as a fallback hardly improved matters, as the Crew can be touchy, and moving your thumb incorrectly could result in a perilous loss of control. My final test game was Don't Starve Together. Don't Starve Together performs about as well as you would expect it to, which is to say that it is not particularly better or worse when playing with the Steam controller. The game provides simple controls that don't rely on reflexes, meaning they could probably be played on a ColecoVision controller if configured properly. I personally wouldn't go out of my way to play Don't Starve Together with a Steam controller, but if you have a new Steam machine and are looking for games that will play well with its controller, Don't Starve Together is certainly a good choice. The Steam controller was an interesting prospect, and the large amount of configuration options make it more versatile than any controller I've seen before it. It is also well designed and provides a unique form of input. Unfortunately, it's not easy to get used to, and I wouldn't recommend giving up your keyboard and mouse for it. The amount of games that supported it on release also seems fairly paltry, and it is a shame because support provides distinct benefits, such as being able to set up contextual control schemes. Maybe you'd have one for the menu and one for the game itself. Perhaps the community will slowly improve it by fine-tuning each game's controls to perfection, but for the time being, the peripherals you are already using are good enough.